and welcome to another episode of Behind the Green Screen. As you can see, there's no green screen behind me, and this makes episode 23. Holla. Okay, so for tonight's episode, I'm finally going to be covering a group of books that have been in my library, uh, I would guess for the past maybe 20 years. And I believe I've read all of the ones that I've read all of the ones that I'm going to preview for tonight. So let me get started. Now, when I start my story, normally what I do is I say picture it because I'm a Golden Girls fan and I love Sophia Petrillo. But I can't do that for this first book that I'm going to talk about because I honestly do not remember how I came across this book. It had to have been the years where I was trying to put together really cool summer reading lists. I have a behind the green screen episode. I think it's episode 2 or 3, where I talk about my summer reading list of 1999. I would go, um, I would go to New York Times when they didn't have a paywall, and I would look at their not their bestseller list, but they would put out recommendations of like the 100 books that you should read of all time, right? And so I think it was one of those types of lists, either from the New York Times or from USA Today, in which I saw this book and I was like, that's kind of interesting, and decided to give it a shot. Okay. So with that being said, have you heard of Gabo? Do you know who Gabo is if I say Gabo? For those who don't know, Gabo is a nickname for author, for writer, for the writer Gabriel Garcia Marquez. He is a Colombian writer whose primary residence was Mexico up until the time of his death. And he has won the Nobel Prize in Literature for one of the books that I'm going to talk about tonight. Okay. All right. But I'm going to talk about my first introduction to Gabo. And that was with this book, Love in the Time of Cholera. I hate when this happens, where that light just throws everything off. I can see it right now because if I do this, oh, okay, never mind, never mind. So this is the book, Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Okay. So this was the first book that introduced me to him, and I fell in love with him from this first read. All right. Now, I think I read this book probably in the early 2000s, maybe the year 2000, where I read this book. So I don't remember much, and I'm just to be completely honest, right? So whatever I do read for you about this book is going to come from the dust jacket. So it's basically about this young woman. Her name is Fermina, and she's betrothed to this doctor. He's very rich, and he is like the man that if you want to marry, he's the man that's going to give you status and everything like that. He's a doctor. He's rich. He comes from a good family. But it's not a happy marriage. I mean, there's a lot of conflict and problems. But she has a, a a man who has a really like a crush on her from the moment he saw her. But he was poor, and there was no way that he had a chance at her heart. But he never stopped loving her. And so the story is about the young woman and her husband and everything else in between, their lives together. But more importantly, what this book does is give you a snapshot into what Colombia was like during the colonial period. It's just very interesting how the indigenous population, slavery, and the Spanish conquistadors all sort of just converge in Colombia with all of these, like this amalgamation of old beliefs and remedies. And the thing is that Gabo, his subgenre or style was magical realism. Magical realism is where stuff that you think is practically impossible happen and is accepted as normal. So, for example, or accepted as real. So, say, for example, if I'm chatting with you right now and all of a sudden you see me start to levitate, in magical realism, they'll be like, oh, she must be happy about something. That's why she's levitating. She'll come back to Earth eventually, right? Stuff like that happens in his books where there's a lot of superstition and, you know, sort of, superstitious beliefs. For example, like, and this is something from my family. My mother's side of the family is from Guyana, South America. And if you don't know your geography, Guyana is at the north, is at north, like at the top of South America. And it's, right next to let's see. Venezuela is to, like, if you're looking at the map, Venezuela is to its left, and to its right is, I want to say, French Suriname, followed by Dutch Suriname. Excuse me. Yeah, French. No, I'm sorry. There's Guyana, which used to be British Guyana. Then there's French Guyana. Then there was Dutch Guyana, which is now called Suriname. Oh, all right. So, you know, because of the slave trade, and yeah, the slave trade is really very impactful to the globe over. There's always effects of slavery, and especially here in the Americas and in the Caribbean. So there are certain superstitions and certain practices that were brought over for the slaves. They brought over their superstitions and religion and ways of practice and way of viewing the world from Africa. Then you have the indigenous population who have lived on the land, and they have their own beliefs and superstitions. And then you have the Spaniards, the conquistadors who came and basically enslaved the people and took over the land. Okay. So you have all these different mix of, there's some Santeria involved, and Santeria is a religion that's a mixture of Catholicism and some of the religions from Africa and those beliefs, Yoruba beliefs. Okay. So when you read any of Gabo's work, you're thrust into a universe where you see the effects of the slave trade and that whole diaspora, right? Because in the society of that time, the slaves, even though they were free, they were still slaves for all intents and purposes. They were viewed as slaves and they were used as slaves. And normally the aristocracy, who are they? Of course, they're going to be those who are descended from Spain. Okay, so of course, the lighter the skin, the better your status is in society. The darker the skin, the worse. All right, and then you have those in between. And so you can see kind of see that if you've ever watched the Disney Pixar movie Encanto, you'll see that. You'll see light to dark skinned people, kinky hair, straight hair, curly hair, all of these mixes of cultures and religions. And what Gabriel Garcia Marquez does is he exposes you to all of that and how, the impacts of it all on Colombia as a society, and why they are the way they are. It's just absolutely incredible when you see that. So it's sort of like you already, like, I open the pages and I already feel the heat, of being in Colombia, right? I can feel they're talking about siesta. I can feel the heat of the siesta. That's how visual Gabo is when it comes to him painting a picture, setting up the scene. He's very good with doing that. Okay. Now, if you remember when I talked last time about Silence of the Lambs and how I saw the movie and then read the book, and I said, sometimes I would prefer to do that. But in this instance, knowing what I know, all right, I recommend reading the book first and then seeing the movie. Yes, it was made into a movie. Let's see here. It was made into a movie. I can't see the year. Why don't they ever put the year in a clear area where you can? Oh, of course they're going to use Roman numerals. How annoying. Let me see if it's on the CD. No, and it's not on the CD. Or maybe 2000? Yeah, it's in Roman numerals here too. And I'm too tired to try and figure it out. But but here is Love in Time of Cholera. As you can see, Javier Bardem is in it and Benjamin Bratt is in it. Um, and Javier Bardem's character is sort of like the person who is suffering from love for Fermina, the one who married the doctor in this book. Like he never stopped loving her. That's him playing. He used to play the violin, to try and win her over and win her attention. And, she was just distant. She was a distant woman, and she was unhappy on top of it. So, yeah. So I recommend reading the book and then seeing the movie. Okay. There's that. All right. So the next book that I read, I can do a Sophia Petrello with this one. Okay. So picture it, the year 2008, and Lisa is in graduate school for her Master of Fine Arts degree in professional writing. Now, let me say this about that program. I don't know if all MFA programs for writing are like this or the arts are like this, but my MFA program, what would happen was you, the student, were responsible for putting together the syllabus. You chose the books, you created the assignments, you created the objective, and what you were going to do to fulfill that objective that would constitute whatever grade you got. So for one of my classes, I chose a series of books, and I can't remember. I would have to look and see if I can find my syllabus from that time period. I doubt it, but I can't remember. But I distinctly remember there was a goal or an objective that I was trying to do in my writing, and I chose that particular course to tackle one of Gabo's most complicated written pieces, and he won the Nobel Prize in Literature for it. And that is 100 Years of Solitude. Okay. So, by the way, on an aside, this was made into a series on Netflix. The first season came out earlier this year. um all unknown actors. There are no stars or whatever. These are, I think these are, if I remember watching behind the scenes, like all the actors are from Colombia, so it could be really authentic. The Netflix series covers half of the book, and then there's supposed to be a second series to cover the other half. Okay. So this book, the reason why it's so complicated is because it follows the life of a family. All right. Now, this is the family. The family starts off with the patriarch and matriarch of this family, the Buendia family, right? There's Jose Arcadio Buendia and then his wife, Ursula Iraguan. Okay. So they got married. Now, here's the thing, they're cousins. I don't know if they're first cousins or second cousins. I can't remember, but they're cousins. And so her mother was like, you know what? You're going to have children with pigtails because you shouldn't be married. You're related to each other. I predict nothing but gloom and doom. And not to get into too much into it because it's kind of funny, but it's kind of tragic, but whatever. So the whole book follows the story of the Buendia family. Now, the reason why there has to be a family tree in this book because it's so complicated. Because Jose and Ursula, they had three kids, two sons, one girl. The girl, there was something wrong with her from birth. Okay, she had issues. She had issues. She never had children. And once you read, you'll see why. But the two brothers, Jose Acadio, who is the oldest one, he took off, right? He left. and didn't come back until he was much older. And then there was Oriano, and he was sort of like he had like a sixth sense, like he could predict stuff. He would have dreams that would tell him what was going to happen in the future. He could predict the future. And so it's a and so his the whole thing is just the family tree is just hella weird. Now, here's the thing with this story. What's so brilliant about this story is that it's sort of a Ouroboros. Now, I know you don't know what that is, or some of you may know that term or Ouroboros, but I'm going to show you a picture. This is it right here. This is my tattoo. It's on my left shoulder blade. That is a Ouroboros. It's the snake that's eating its tail. And if you're not familiar, that is the symbol for infinity. What it begins and ends at the same time, like at the same period. Where it begins, it ends. Okay, the first and the last. So that's what the Ouroboros signify. For my tattoo in the middle, I have the tree of life in there. You know what the tree of life is. So this book is basically the family is a Ouroboros. It ends where it begins, and it's absolutely brilliant. Brilliant. And after I was finished with this book, I had to sit down and just like untangle my mind because he blew it. He blew it clear off my neck. It was just a wonderful piece of work. I do recommend reading the book first before seeing the Netflix uh, uh, series. However, if the book now I'm going to say this book, take your time with it if you want to tackle this book. All right, because the family tree is so complicated and people are there, like there's two people with the same name. So sometimes you're thinking it's Jose Acario that they're talking about, but no, they're talking about another Jose. So you sort of lose track of where they are in the family tree or what he's just talking about. So take your time and don't hesitate to go back to that family tree if you get lost because it will confuse you. But if you are so confused and you feel like a little bit frustrated, go ahead and watch the series. It will kind of clear it up for you because that's how complicated it is. But this was an excellent book. I can understand why it won the Nobel Prize in Literature, and you will not be disappointed. It's a wonderful story. Just the story, the construction of the story, excellent, excellent. All right. So the next one I have in my library of Love and Other Demons. This is listed as a collection, but I think it's more like a novella. You can see there's not much meat to it, right? And this one is a very supernatural dealing with that integration or that dissection I should say between Catholicism, God and faith and superstition and believing in the supernatural and believing that the impossible is possible, you know. And also it gives you a snapshot of colonial time again in Colombia during that period. I think it takes place in Colombia, this one. It's been a while. It's been over 20 years, and shame on me, shame on me for really not rereading my books, which I know everybody does and I should do too. But I hold on to them and I just treasure them and instead of really treasuring them and honoring them by rereading them. So I'm going to change that habit. That's going to be something that I work on, and I'm not going to wait for New Year's Day to do that, but that is something that I will work on. Rereading the stuff that brought me so much joy in the past. All right. So the last book I'm going to talk about is Chronicle of a Death Foretold. Now, I read this. When I picked up all these books, I was like, did I read this one? Yeah, I read this one. I did. And the thing is that I read it and I wasn't all that into it because I didn't like the translation. And I've talked about this that there is a difference between translation and transliteration. Not to say that this was transliterated, but the translation was not, it did not set the scene like I know Gabriel Garcia likes Marquez likes to set the scene. It didn't sing to me. I didn't feel like I was wherever this took place. I didn't feel like I was in that town. And I think it had a lot to do with the way it was translated. But the story is good. It's a mystery. Okay. But again, it's magical realism. So the impossible is possible, just so you know. Right. Okay. So those are my books, for this episode. I do have audiobooks because I have a ton of those that I bought through Audible. And I believe the one that he put out right before he died was My Melancholy Horrors. So I have the audiobook for that, and I need to read that. And I think I also have, there's another one that I saw in here, and I think I have that as um, audiobook as well. And that is No One Writes to the Colonel and Other Stories, or the Colonel and Other Stories. So that's another one that I have as an audiobook that I really need to listen to. All right. So to wrap up this episode for today, for the author, hey, I said it right this time. Author. Hey, all right, very good. So for today's books, from Gabriel Garcia Marquez, we have Chronicle of a Death Foretold, Of Love and Other Demons, his masterpiece, 100 Years of Solitude. Remember, take your time on this one. It's a Ouroboros. And Love in the Time of Cholera. Oh, crap. I hate when this happens. My screen lit up. That's why. All right. So there you are. Um, is there any one that I recommend over the other? They're all good. They're all good. But I mean, if you really want to, how can I put this? 100 Years of Solitude is about humanity, and it will touch you. It will, just the sheer creativity that went into this saga, and it is a saga. It's a saga of the Wendia family. Um, it's just amazing, just absolutely amazing to me. You will not be disappointed. You get yourself a glass of wine, you sit down with some nice, something sweet to eat, settle in your favorite chair. If you have a fireplace, flip that fireplace on and just buckle up, because you will be pulled into a fictional world that will just take you away from whatever's going on in your life at the moment. And it'd be nice to sort of witness someone else's disasters instead of the ones that's going on in your life right now, right? Okay, then. So that's it for this episode. So, all right, you know what's coming next. We at the end, it's time to do our mantra. All is well. Everything is working for my highest good. Out of this experience, only good will come. I am safe. Namaste. See you next time for another episode of Behind the Green Screen.